As a religious Jewish woman, I wanted to have a voice in the bigger world. I had big dreams. It's very difficult for there to be female thought leaders in the frum community.
There aren't very many of you. You are one of those anomalies, an incredible writer, and then also being a rebbetzin of an Orthodox shul.
I don't know if I necessarily saw myself married to a rabbi. And after a few dates, he said, "You're great, but we're never getting married. Just promise me one thing, that you'll never write about me." Of course I did write. It's my first essay in the New York Times. We should be encouraging our young people to be more interesting. The world, especially the digital world, has flattened us and our identities.
It's going to be really, really hard for us to build leaders, especially women, who are not bold enough to be authentic.
We are so afraid of female voices.
And if we don't change, we're going to lose. I'm much more concerned about completely losing women from their connection to Yiddishkeit than worrying that they're suddenly going to become super woke. But let's just have the honest conversation. Welcome to Inspired to Lead. We'd like to thank our friends at Roth & Co., innovators in accounting and business advisory, for making this conversation possible. We're coming to you from New York. I'm your host, Talia Meshiach. Today, I'm joined by writer, rebbetzin, and co-founder of the Altneue Synagogue, Avital Chizik-Goldschmidt. Avital, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now that I've been able to get through saying your name.
Yes.
Nobody else got to see the rounds before as I was doing the introductions. So first of all, Avital, I'm really so excited to have you.
It's such a treat.
I have to, okay, so here's where I first heard about you is my...
Oh, no.
No, I'll tell you. So my son-in-law knows who you are, and his brother goes to your shul. And then we were making connections because your in-laws are across the hall from my parents' apartment in Yerushalayim, where many of my children stay during their Shana Rishona. And then your sister-in-law was the producer of our podcast last year. So, and you're best friends with Rivka Fox. So we had all these different connections. And everyone was like, You've got to interview Avital. She's amazing. and I'm starting to learn a little bit about you. And I was like, yes, you are incredible. It's different, so inspiring. And I'm really, really excited to tell your story and just talk about topics that are going to be really fun for us, maybe hard for others to hear, but
I'm
really
excited
fun.
to get into it.
We're going to get into it, and we're just going to go for it. So let's just start. I'd love for you just to be able to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Right. Where do I begin? I always say I grew up Russian speaking. That's a big part of who I am. I come from a Russian speaking background. My parents are refugees from the Soviet Union. Pretty much from a very young age, I knew I wanted to become a writer. That was as soon as I learned how to write. I wanted to write books and stories and poems. And I really pursued that throughout the years. I grew up in Highland Park, New Jersey, a small town. And I began writing as a kid, as a teenager, for magazines, for contests, national competitions. It was really unusual for sort of the schools that I went to, in that I had these really, really big ambitions and dreams, and it was sort of like not the normal thing in the community. But I did it anyways.
Can I ask you about that?
Yeah,
So
go
two
for
things.
it.
First of all, what do you think? Because sometimes I find that if it's not the norm for the community, there's usually parents or something else that if someone who tells, especially a young girl, that you can be anything you want to be. So I'm curious about that. And also what it was to recognize at such a young age that you wanted to write.
Okay, so first of all, I grew up in a very literary home where we were surrounded by books. There were always books being given. Every birthday gift, Hanukkah gift was always a book. It was never anything else. And
was that okay? Because, I could imagine if I was a kid and my parents gave me a book, I'd be like, come on, I want to get a toy.
I was so excited.
Okay,
it was the most
awesome.
exciting thing. There was nothing more exciting than the smell of a fresh new book. And that was the way my parents raised me. It's how I am actually, thank God, raising my children. And they just fed me constantly, and in two different languages, in English and in Russian.
And you have no accent, like your English.
I grew up here.
Yeah, wow. How old were you when you came to America?
I was born here.
Oh, so you were born here. Wow.
Yeah, I was born here, raised speaking Russian at home, which is pretty typical in the Russian Jewish community. There's a lot of pride in the culture. It's not just the language, it's also the culture that comes with it. And a lot of that culture, especially for the Jews coming from the former Soviet Union, is this love of learning, of being like a lifelong student, never giving up on that. So my father is a physicist, but he can also recite poetry, and he also appreciates, music. And it was very much this a Renaissance culture that was pretty typical, I would say, for Russian Jews. So that was how I was raised, definitely from my parents in the sense of loving literature. And then in terms of ambitions and dreams, I think a lot of it was really kind of this like inner fire in me. I wanted something. I wanted to write. I wanted to publish. It was just something that I was dreaming of, dying of for. It was all I wanted, really at a very young age.
Was there
12,
a mentor
13.
that you had who did that and you looked
in
up
high
to?
school? In high school, I had a few very formative English teachers who I'm still in touch with today, which is really special. The power of an English teacher to walk over to a young girl and say, you have talent. This essay was really something special. I want you to work on this more. I want you to apply to this, contest, award, fellowship, is really beyond words. And there were two teachers specifically who did that for me, and they really set me on my path.
That's amazing. Some people don't even realize, like, I just want the teachers out there to realize
Yes.
that the impact they can have, like one teacher could have on their student to like
Huge.
Grow up and change the world.
Huge. I think number one is teachers, and number two, actually, I did seek out a lot of opportunities outside of my high school. I went to Berea High School in New Jersey, and there were a lot of these national competitions that are still around, and different, fellowships and awards, and it was very important to me to get those things. It was not the normal thing in my high school to do that, and I remember I had a teacher who said, it's not a good trait in you. It's like it's a yetzer hara for you that you want prestige. Like it's a bad, an evil inclination in you. Which
It
was
sounds
a very
like
hard
she
thing
was
to hear.
really the distinction between prestige and ambition, right? You
Right.
can have ambition without necessarily wanting prestige.
Certainly. But for me, it was something more. I wanted to have impact, and I felt also very strongly like, as a religious Jewish woman, I wanted to have a voice in the bigger world. That was, even as a teenager, that was important to me. And I applied and I won a lot of them, which was also very unusual. And I tell parents now all the time that if your teenager sees an extracurricular opportunity like this, please encourage them to do it, because that feeling of someone else outside your school, outside your family saying, yes, you have it in you, you have a talent, you have to nurture it, you have to water it, feed it, that is so powerful.
Yeah, I feel like, young kids today, they have to be motivated to like do more, even more so than I feel like when you're younger than I am, but when you were growing up, when I was growing up, and when somebody tells you that you have the talent to be something more, that's what ignites, I think, in somebody young to be like, wait, I can? They believe in me? What does that look like? And then I think once you go and do a couple of those things, right, where you work at something really hard and then you get acknowledged for that and you achieve it, then it creates like that really like waters that feeling of, okay, now I want to go out and do it again and again, because it's that sense of accomplishment, right? And it gives you that confidence, and you get that feeling. And really, the harder you work at something, we all know this, the harder you work at something and then you achieve it, the better that feels, that sense of accomplishment. And then you build that confidence. Then when you become an adult, you know that when you work at something and something hard in your life, you're going to be able to overcome it. But if children are never exposed, and certainly teens are never exposed and never have the opportunity to do something that's really hard for them and accomplish it, then they're not going to necessarily start doing that when they're adults. It's very hard to do that as an adult. It's much easier to take those chances as a child.
You have to teach them and ourselves to love the burn, the way we do in the gym, right? To like it, to enjoy the feeling of working hard.
So, and I know you went to Stern.
Yes, I went to Stern.
And you became an incredible writer and well-known. And really today, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the combination of what you've done in the corporate world, like being out in the working world as a woman, and then also being a rebbetzin of an Orthodox shul, because there aren't very many of you. You are one of those anomalies, and I think that is a huge part of what is making you incredibly successful, and potentially a blueprint for what is going to be needed in future generations in order to continue to inspire the community. And so what I would love to start is just let's take the first half and talk about your job, the corporate world, and kind of after you graduated, what that looked like.
Yeah.
And then I want to talk about your husband and you, because that is also another dynamic. I think not all men can be married to very strong women. And then I want to talk about everything around the shul that you've built, the community that you've built, so that we'll kind of come back and see all sides of you.
Yeah, these are all parallel tracks in my life, and it's complex. It's like when you have several pots on the stove and they're all cooking and they all have different times and different, textures going on. So I pretty much right out of college started writing for Haaretz, which is the Israeli version, I would say, of the New York Times. It's a large, liberal, prestigious paper based out of Tel Aviv. I wrote for them from here, largely on life in New York and somewhat travel writing. I started off with personal essays, and that eventually led me into more political reporting and cultural writing, which is, by the way, a typical trajectory for a lot of young women, is when they want to start writing and getting into journalism, they have a little bit of imposter syndrome and they feel, what can I say about the Middle East? What can I say about the sciences? I have nothing to add. Let me just write my own personal experience. And eventually they start building up sort of the confidence to write on other things. But I have to say my personal essays were, I think, quite resonant for other religious women, actually not only Jewish. A lot of religious women from other faiths would reach out to me over the years, responding to what I had written, saying that they had really related to it. I wrote a lot about what we're talking about, right? Being a passionately religious woman with ambitions, with careers, with curiosity about the bigger world, and how to reconcile them when they sometimes feel incongruent. That was about 5 years. And then I became the features editor at the Forward, which is an American Jewish newspaper based here in downtown Manhattan. And I did a lot of actually really fun reporting. I was just reflecting on it. A lot of fun reporting on the Orthodox community. That was my beat. I really wanted to dive deep into my own community. A lot of, obviously questions around gender, but other things as well, around education, around culture.
Were they pretty controversial? Did you get
many were very controversial.
Was that hard for you when, I know we were talking about this a little bit before, when you are sharing what you feel strongly and people are, kind of hating on it a little bit?
A lot, not a little bit, a lot hating on it. So actually, I mean, my controversy started even earlier with my first sort of breakthrough piece back in the days when things went viral. I feel like nothing goes viral anymore. But I wrote an essay about sort of the way I think we're not teaching modesty, tznius correctly in the frum community. And that I was 20 years old. I was still at Stern, and that blew up. And people were so upset by it. It was very fiery. And that was really the beginning. And I kept writing my observations, my essays. I would write a lot about my dating life at the time, which was also pretty salacious in that way. Like, oh my God, this girl's talking about this like yeshiva boy she's going out with in like a wintry night in Jerusalem, and the conversations that we're having and the debates, and how I feel at one part of me wants to be part of this community, another part of me struggles with it, right? So I wrote a lot about this in a very vulnerable way.
Was that hard for you to open yourself like that to the world?
When I write,
this was before, right? Everybody was doing that all the time, correct?
Right, exactly. This is before everyone was doing this.
Right.
Exactly. That's a really good distinction. Ironically, since everyone started doing it, I became much more closed. Like, I don't want to be part of this. But at the time, actually, it felt to me, it wasn't even that it was therapeutic. It actually was my craft. It was my writing. This is the way I engaged with the world. I processed ideas. I processed experiences. I was 20, 21. I was really young. And I when I write, I don't think about the audience. I just write. I edit myself, but not because, I'm afraid of what someone is going to say when they read it, but more because I want to make the prose better. So
do you appreciate that you write something that creates a major conversation around it? Because
of course,
you're not going to have both, right? So if people want to have an impact and they want to take a topic like this that potentially is controversial, and you want to change something, then you have to be ready to have all the people that are going to be like, wow, you have all the courage to say this, but you're also going to get all the people who never like change, who some people are just not nice, and no matter what's out there, they just need to comment negatively about it, but you have to be ready for it. So did you appreciate that difference? Like, what was that like for you? Because I think some people who are their first time they do something very impactful and publicly, they're like, why are people all hating on me? And I was just like, that's what's going to happen when you have the courage to do something big.
Of course, you will never, if you're doing something right, there will always be people who are upset with you. It's like the famous idea of Mordechai at the end of the story of Esther. It says, Mordechai ratzoi l'rov echav. He's liked by most of his people. Like, you could literally save your people from genocide, and not everyone will like you. Like, you can do the most unbelievable things, and there will always be people who don't agree with you. It's the funniest thing. When people come up to me, just 2 Shabbases ago, a girl comes up to me at shul, rebbetzin, I read some of your work. I don't agree with everything you say. That's like a very common thing that, like, specifically religious people like to say to me. And I always think, don't you understand that part of reading comprehension is like, that yes, you will not agree with everything that someone writes. That's so strange that we think that is something we're supposed to do. And I think that's a bigger conversation about conformity as a norm in the religious community, that we think that we all have to like align on every single piece. No, there's supposed to be debate. We come from the most majestic lineage of great debate, right? And it's a very funny piece of culture, but there was a lot of controversy at the time, and I would do, as I went more and more actually into reporting, then it got even more, I would say, heated, because it's not just me talking about my experiences or my emotions. I was uncovering things, right? I was exposing things, and I was so passionate about it, though, at the same time, because I really believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and that we cannot keep things closed if we want to be able to deal with certain issues in the community. And that was really what I focused on in those years at the Forward.
Did you have a guide like in Das Torah to help you?
Yes.
I think that's important for people to understand. I think there's always an assumption when a major topic comes up that they assume that, oh, you're just having your own, you're not following, Das Torah. And so I think
specifically around women, by the way, I think women get this much more. There's this assumption that, she's the witch, right? She's the one who's not doing, who's stepping out of line. There's a lot less flexibility for women. By the way, when I was writing for Haaretz, the first years, I was also single. The Forward, I was already married, but that was another layer of vulnerability. And people would tell me all the time, what are you doing? You're single. You're never going to get married. Why are you writing like this? And I would always say, what are you talking about? It's the best filter in the world. I'm not going to waste my time with guys who don't want to be with someone like me. I'm just being open about who I am.
I love that answer.
Yeah. So I say that to people now all the time. So after the Forward, I went to, I took 2 years off to freelance, not off. I was freelancing and building a shul, which we'll talk about later. And I had a list of bylines of magazines that I wanted to get into. So I just went through them. The New York Times, The Atlantic, Vogue, Foreign Policy, The New Republic, Glamour, et cetera, et cetera.
Super ambitious.
I hit them, thankfully.
Bucket list. Go for it.
A little bit, yeah. I felt like, you know what? By 30, I want to get into all these magazines.
This also goes towards, I really do believe when people put their mind to something and they're focused on it, you could achieve anything you really, really set your mind to, that you have, especially when you have the skills. Obviously, you can't say, I set my mind to being a star basketball player and I have no basketball talent. But when you understand that you have talent, to be ambitious, to think bigger, and just go for it, it's amazing. And I think that is something really important to teach, especially younger people, that they've got to, go for it. Go for the big things.
So I think you're right. Especially when it comes to entrepreneurship, where this doesn't always work, frankly, is actually in an industry like the media, when you are dealing with a lot of gatekeeping. So you are, in order to get into these magazines, you have to have connections, you have to know an editor. These days it's complicated, frankly, as a Jew to get into a lot of these publications, but separate conversation. So there's a lot of gatekeeping, and you can be so talented and come up with the most brilliant ideas. But if you don't have an in, or you happen to catch an editor on a good day, and I say this as a former editor myself, I was also in this position. It's a really hard thing to break through. But I did very much, I was really relentless. Like, I would knock on every door. I didn't care how many rejections. Everyone would, at the time, would say, oh, you're so accomplished. You've had all these publications. It's so unusual, for a religious woman. And I would always say, like, you only see the tip of the iceberg, right?
Yes.
There's an iceberg below the water of rejections that are inevitable if you're going to try.
And this is such a common thing. I'll tell you, my son-in-law is waiting to hear if he matches. He's doing ortho surgery, so it's very, very competitive. He's worked so hard. My daughter alongside him with a tremendous amount of sacrifice. And he finds out on Monday if he matches, and then Friday where he matches. And it's very, very stressful for them. And they shared with me that someone gave my son-in-law advice. He said, winners always find a way to win. And I thought that was such a great line. Said, if you don't match, you're going to do this, you'll do that, you're going to figure it out, you will be an orthopedic surgeon. And it just reminds me of what you're saying. Even sometimes it's going to be really difficult. Gates will be up, but winners find a way to win.
Find your way.
Yeah, which I love.
And by the way, I really also believe if something's not working out, it may just not be the right direction. And maybe, that window is not there, but the door is open. Like, you have to find another way to it. I really believe that.
So, and then after?
And after that, I actually pivoted slightly into business journalism. I was a news editor at The Real Deal here in New York City. I edited stories largely focused on New York City politics and business. It was a totally new area for me. I learned incredibly from really focusing in a very granular way on city politics and the very critical role that real estate plays that is, by the way, very relevant to what is happening in the city today, which we're pretty concerned about. But those city politics, like, I was following our current mayor when no one knew about him and editing stories about him and saying, this is interesting. This is different. I think this guy is going to become mayor one day. And people thought I was crazy, but I was already, looking very closely at what was sort of happening on a very, very local level. So that was a fascinating experience as well. I led a lot of investigations. I had worked with a lot of great reporters there. And I just left to work on a book. That was my next big goal on my vision board in my home office.
That is super exciting. Wow. A book takes a lot of work.
A lot of work, a lot of daily, quiet, unglamorous work. Right after this, I'm going to the New York Public Library, and I'm just going to sit there for 3 hours.
Just really focus.
Working. Yeah, 700 words a day at least.
Wow.
Yes.
A lot of discipline.
It's the only way.
All right. So now I want to talk a little bit about how you met your husband. And also, we talked a little bit about how difficult it is sometimes for ambitious women to find men that really appreciate them and support them. And I'd love for you just to talk a little bit about that because, I know your mother-in-law and your father-in-law, and I can imagine that there was incredible role models for your husband, and your mother-in-law started a school. Like, amazing. I'll let you tell a little bit about that. But let's start by talking about how you met your husband and that journey.
I actually tell this story when I come to girls' high schools to speak. They always ask me to share this story. It's very funny, but it's a cute one. So my husband grew up in Moscow, Russia, which means he's Russian-speaking like me, which was very unusual for me to meet someone with a similar background, but an entirely different background. He comes from a rabbinic family. His father was the chief rabbi of Moscow for many years. His mother, as you said, started a school, really grew up in a European rabbinic household, and very, very different from,
and
my
he learned
upbringing.
In very big yeshivas.
He went to Panovich in Bnei Brak, for Yeshiva Tana, then Hebron in Yerushalayim, and then Lakewood here, and then Oruvin in Muncie. So, yes.
Very different background.
Very different background from a daughter of Russian Balei Tshuva living in New Jersey. And in Stern College writing controversial essays at the age of 20. So we were set up by mutual friends, and we hit it off right away. The first date, I came back to my Stern dorm room, and I said to my roommate, I think this is the one. I felt it very strongly, like he's my person. I wasn't sure it would work out, but I felt like he's if we get married, we could do great things for the Jewish people together. It's a crazy thing to think about, to say at age 20, but that gives you a peek into my brain, even at a young age. And
were you looking for that? You were like looking for someone who you could be partners with to have a tremendous impact on the world?
I think I was. I really was. I think it's interesting to reflect on those years. I thought a lot about impact, and I thought as a writer already, I had big dreams. And I don't know if I necessarily saw myself, married to a rabbi and to a community rabbi, but it made sense because I felt really strongly about this. So we went on a few dates and we really liked each other. And after a few dates, he said, "You're great, but we're never getting married. This is not going to work. You're on team offense. I'm on team defense. You're this like outgoing journalist and I'm the conservative rabbinic establishment. It's never going to work." And I was heartbroken. And at the end of that date, he said, "Just make me one promise." As I got up to go into my shot and scene dorm on 29th Street, he said, "Just promise me one thing, that you'll never write about me and that we dated." And I was like, the least of my problems. He thinks that he's going to be in my writing. So I said, whatever, fine. And I stomped off. And then, of course, I did write because I write. That's how I do everything. I process everything through my writing. And I ended up writing an essay that was about something else. But it was also, again, about this personal essay repertoire that I had at the time about being a religious woman and but living in the bigger modern world and sort of reconciling these things, and also about how dating is basically really hard when you're in this position because, these boys don't want these types of girls. Like, I'm in this weird position. And I dated someone like this before. And I wrote this whole paragraph that was very obviously about my now husband. But everyone in our circles knew that we had gone out, and they knew that I was writing about him because I had some clues in there. And that essay actually got published in the New York Times. It was my first essay in the Times.
So much for telling him you're not going to write about him.
Yeah, exactly. But I also didn't care because I thought I'm never going to see him again.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, I broke a promise, but at least I got a good essay out of it. Like, I want material. I need content, as they say. So I published the essay. It was very exciting. I was 21 with my first New York Times byline. And of course, he had called the shadchan and said, "How could you set me up with a girl like this?" He was very upset about it because all his friends had read about it. And it was like, oh my gosh, this girl took Benji down. And very long story short, we got back together 2 years later. We were at the same conference where actually I was reporting and he was speaking. By then, he was an assistant rabbi at the synagogue in the Upper East Side where he was at the time. And we ended up just sitting in the lobby and talking all night. And that was, and after that, he wrote me a note saying, an email, maybe he saw something restless in her eyes. Maybe he was scared because he saw something restless in her eyes. Do you want to discuss? It was a quote from the essay I had written at the time. And that was it. And we went out for dinner and got engaged a few months later.
Okay, so many things from that. Okay,
yeah.
First of all, the fact that you wrote was like a pre-screen of any of the guys you were going to date.
Yeah.
So
it was my filter.
Yeah, because I also think it's just a tremendous amount of courage because I know I have kids. They're not in shidduchim right now, but they recently were, and they're friends, and everybody's so worried about anything they do too publicly could mean that that could affect it. And I just think I love what you did because you're like, this is who I am. And I want the person that I marry to appreciate that about me. So if they're not, now they see who I am. And if they don't appreciate it, then I don't even have to waste any time going out with them.
I think, yes. And also, I say this to everyone now. I'm in a different position when it comes to people in the dating stage in their lives. I really believe it's important to differentiate yourself as a human being. Like, be interesting. I feel like we're all so pressed to just be quiet and silent and back to this conformity thing, to be like everyone else, but then you don't differentiate yourself. So how does someone know if they're interested? Like, the more I wrote, the more I had people inquiring to, at the time, right? It was really funny, but people were like, okay, she's different. That's interesting, right? And I feel like we don't realize it. Like, we should be encouraging our young people to be more interesting. The world, especially the digital world, has flattened us and our identities. We're all the same. We design our houses the same. We all dress the same. We speak the same, and I think it's such a sad reality to live in, that everyone has to be the same.
Where do you think that comes from? Because I think people, especially hashkafically, they look around like, who do I associate myself with? Who does that look like? I have definitely a lot of these conversations with my children often, and it's becoming like I need to be like somebody, as opposed to just like your follow halacha, just be you. Like you don't need to have that.
I relate, because I remember being in that mental state myself at various points in my life. When I was single, I struggled with this. After we got married, I feel like, and I feel like at a certain point, once you liberate yourself from that way of thinking, life becomes so much more fun and colorful, and not in any way that compromises your religious observance. Just like be an individual, be unique. It's hard for me now to relate to that, even that part of me that felt that way. And I did feel that way at a certain point. Why do people feel that way? Number one, we all seek belonging in different ways. We're all seeking a very deep sense of belonging. I think that's why a lot of people actually become religious, because they're seeking community, because they don't have community outside of this. So, and in a very sort of very nuanced and micro way, people want to say that this is their rabbi, this is their yeshiva, this is their identity. But
even sometimes as much as these are the friends that I have to be
friends with.
Yeah, or even
the friends, or this area of the town that I live in. Not just the town, this area, right? Yeah. It's a hard thing for me to now understand, because I'm a New Yorker now. I'm a Manhattanite, where there is no such thing really, because it's so diverse, and I love that. It's diverse. It's in a way, it's anonymous. You kind of just do your own thing, and people respect you for it.
It's going to be really, really hard for us to build leaders out of especially women who are not bold enough to be authentic, to be themselves, to do something different from everybody else. And I feel like the group think is holding us back tremendously. Men also, but we're talking about women. So I think women even more so are afraid to be different.
Yeah. Because it is scary to be different as a woman, and as a religious woman specifically, and to be visible, right? That's part of the challenge, I think, is, that I've learned the hard way in being a writer and being a voice, that I just did my own thing. And I got so much hate for it. If you would see the amount of, unfortunately, people in the frum community who would write to me like really terrible things, like threats and slurs online publicly. It was so strange to me. But people, we live in a world where you can hide behind a screen and say anything you want. I never did that. I always put my name on it, right? I always did the work. Meaning I didn't comment something negatively. I was doing reporting, right? But I wasn't afraid to do it. I did it.
I also think there was an assumption that you didn't even have Das Torah threat. I think there wasn't even, they'd be like, oh, she's just kind of throwing out all these crazy views, and it's not aligned with, traditional Orthodox Judaism, but yet you did, like the entire process. And I think you're saying, as we were talking before, is just, it's even more difficult for women.
It's very difficult for there to be female thought leaders in the frum community. I think that's how I would say it, right? Because to build a business as a frum woman, I think it's a better time than ever before to do such a thing, right? There are a lot of things that are acceptable, but to be a thought leader, like a real thought leader who's saying things that may not be comfortable, is still very, very hard. Now it's gotten easier for me, thank God, but there were many hard years. And
what gave you the courage to continue to do it?
Because I really believed in this with such conviction that this is the right thing to do, that you have to pursue truth. And the more I would spend time in different parts of the frum community, both in the States and in Israel, I saw how much, not just people were shoving things under a rug, but like people, there was no there's no value of truth for a lot of people. I hate to say that, but it's a very hard thing to say, and it's true. People don't want to hear truths about themselves, about their own communities. I understand it. It's uncomfortable. But sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? We have to be able to deal with them. Now, the climate has changed now, actually. I think post-October 7th, it's not the season to focus on this as much. That's another hot take I have, which is a very painful thing to say. Yeah. Because there are a lot of problems in these communities, in our communities. But we have also bigger problems now outside.
Yeah.
I feel like we almost don't even have the luxury of doing that work. The stories that I was doing before October 7th, I look back at those days with nostalgia, that I was able to focus on community problems, because now I'm worried about existential questions, even here in New York, right? It's different.
Well, I think one of the powerful things that you were able to do, and it's just amazing hearing this journey of all the experience you had on the corporate side of being able to be a thought leader and having the courage to take all the haters and just continue to do what you're doing and inspire so many people, I'm sure, along the way, and then come in and marry a rabbi, and then have this opportunity for the two of you to come together and really put like a different blueprint on what a shul, should look like in, 2026, and what the next generation really needs. And it's just almost as I'm hearing you talk, it's like these, both this like kind of converged at this place, and now it's giving you this platform in a different way. So you had the platform as a writer, but now a platform as like a rebbetzin. So, which is really fascinating. So I'd love for you to talk about, a little bit about what that was like to build that, the strength and grit that it took you and your husband to get to this place, and a little bit about what makes it so different than everything else that's out there, which is, I'm sure, is what is making it incredibly successful.
It's all about differentiation. It keeps coming back to that, right? But yeah, there's a lot of convergence here in my journalistic experience, and somewhat pastoral, but also just like building, right? The work that we're doing here as a community builders. So we started the shul a little more than 4 years ago now. My husband was an assistant rabbi at a shul in the neighborhood. When we discovered financial irregularities there, he was thrown out, and we were almost on the street. I was pregnant with our third kid. My health insurance was cut off, and the community members were calling us frantic. What happened? What's going on? Where are you going? Where are you davening this Shabbos? And we were like, where are we davening this Shabbos? Like, we're barely surviving here. We didn't know what we were going to do with ourselves. And we had to reorient our whole life suddenly in a very sudden, like really, really sudden, terrible way. He had served there for 10 years before that. And
now in that old shul, he had a following, clearly. Did you also have a strong position in that shul?
No.
Okay.
I tried my best to serve. I felt very strongly that the women and the girls needed more of a female educator, someone who's in touch with them, who's working with them, who's just there and present. There was no room for that there. It was not the culture. And to the extent that we would be called in, and I would get punished if I would give like a little shir in my home type of thing. It was crazy.
So it really doesn't sound like it was the right fit for you.
No, in retrospect, it's very interesting. Some months later after this whole story, someone came up to me and said, I remember watching you there in that place, and you were like a caged bird.
Mm-hmm.
And it really shocked me that someone from the outside was able to see how I felt. But that was, and I don't think it's specific to this place, by the way. I think there are a lot of communities, unfortunately, that have not really shifted with the times and thinking about this in a really sort of formalized way. So where are we davening this Shabbos? What do you mean? They said, we're coming to your living room, and we're just gonna have a minyan there. So we had 40 people show up at our living room that first Shabbos. And the second Shabbos, we had 200 people show up. We had to rent a space. We already knew we were expecting a large crowd. And we just had a Shabbos morning davening. And so began a 2-year journey of week by week by week, renting various spaces around the neighborhood on the Upper East Side. Thank God, every week it grew. And this is still the end of COVID. And we were, I can't even describe to you the feverish fog of those months, of that first year or two, where we are literally a shul on wheels. We had incredible partners in this. We had lay leaders who were helping us, who were supporting this financially. We had volunteers who were helping. We had staff people who we started hiring to help us to figure this out. Someone gave us a free space for an office and for a daily minyan. We started daily shacharis. Not even immediately in our neighborhood, slightly far away, but we just made it work, and it was messy.
During this time, well, so first of all, I appreciate just a little bit of it. My parents were part of starting a shul in Glendale, Wisconsin, and I can remember, so they broke off from it was actually for them, it was a conservative, they actually had at that time conservative shuls. I was very young, and they wanted to start an Orthodox shul and with another 5 families in the community. And they started by just doing it in I remember our living room. We'd rotate houses, and then WITS, which is the Haaretz yeshiva, they would send yeshiva guys for Shabbos to help make the minyan in each of these shuls. And then it was little by little, and then they rented a space. So I watched my parents do something, and which was really inspiring to me. But I'm curious, during this time, were you starting to realize your place in this new shul on wheels, which eventually could become something, and the power of that for you? Like, tell me a little bit about your perspective that shifted and the opportunity that you saw.
For sure. It was from the beginning. So it was all hands on deck. So, and not in a behind the scenes way. I was very much next to my husband in everything possible that I could do. And when we're thinking about strategy, when we're thinking about the name of the shul, which we named the Altneue Synagogue, the idea of old and new coming together in this place, the vision, building our first little website, designing the logo on Canva one late night. I was doing a lot of that.
Did your husband say to you, okay, this time around, we're doing this together?
We didn't even have a minute to think that.
It just happened.
It's so funny
organically?
No, yeah. We were surviving. It was adrenaline. During this time, you should just know.
But it could have been just you were doing your thing, and you could have been like, you do your thing, like, because this sounded like this was his thing. But now all of a sudden there's this opportunity, it sounds like, for you to truly come together as partners in this.
It's funny, I never thought about it. I didn't think about an alternative. We were in it together. That was it. And it was partners through and through. During this time, there were also a lot of newspapers, a lot of media was covering this whole controversy at the time. And I was fielding calls from tabloid reporters. I had the New York Times showing up to shul on Shabbos. It was crazy. We were living in a very crazy time. And it was interesting, by the way, because I'm not someone who's afraid of controversy, as we talked about. I'm not someone who's afraid of being visible. But this experience was something next level that I never could have imagined how challenging it would be, but also how much it would build that resilience and that grit. Eleanor Roosevelt says that a woman in the public eye has to build a hide as tough as a rhinoceros. And I think about it a lot. Like, you really need a tough skin. It was very difficult. And also, but we didn't have a minute to think like, how are we, like, what role am I playing for, like, no, it was just all in. And it was interesting because even that first Shabbos, like, we sent an invite for a Shabbos minyan. We signed both of our names at the bottom of it. It wasn't just Rabbi Goldschmidt, it was Rabbi and Avital, So it was very much a joint effort. And I had a lot of very strong opinions on the way things, my husband also does. He's very opinionated, and he's a real force in his own right. He's objectively a brilliant sermon giver. I'm not saying this just because I'm biased. People know that. That is, he has a real way of speaking. And we put everything, all of those, I guess, talents and skills and ideas together to build this.
But you also did it differently than everybody else. And
so
this
how
was
do
your
we do
opportunity
it?
to do it differently.
Right. So that was a big piece. So that was what we did think about a lot, sort of strategically. We didn't think about, my role versus, it was more, okay, we know what exists in this neighborhood, but we also know what doesn't exist. And can we create what doesn't exist? We had a very specific vision for that. On the experience of people, on the environment. It's not a typical, in our bylaws, every shul in New York City, you have to have bylaws. Like we actually had to study what's the process of starting your own house of worship in New York City. It was very interesting. And in the bylaws, it says just an Orthodox synagogue. It's not a modern Orthodox synagogue with whatever complexities and questions that brings up. It's just a shul, right? And we wanted to do something different that was less institutional, that was warmer, that had soul, that also had intellectual rigor also, though, right? That it shouldn't just be a geschmack, a heimish place to come to daven. It should be somewhere where you feel that your mind is also being exercised, and that you feel at home. You feel that you belong. So
this was very intentional.
Very intentional. Very intentional. We definitely took like a blank canvas and said, okay, what do we envision?
Because did you feel that that's what was missing from everywhere else?
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely in the unique way that we wanted to do it. Yeah. There was no one else doing that.
Yeah.
And thank God it showed. Right, within pretty quickly, I would say, to the extent that by within 2 years, we were renting large spaces like the Pierre Ballroom for davening. We had 600 people coming for Shabbos. October 7th happened, and then it just goes even more. You have tons of young people coming, searching for Judaism, searching to connect to Jewishness, afraid, worried about their future. And so many young people showing up to shul had never gone to an Orthodox synagogue before, and they would say, it's so weird that I feel at home here, and also I feel like an outsider everywhere else in my life. At work, no one understands what I'm going through. This is the one place in New York City I can come to where I know I belong. And that was a common thread for so long. Unfortunately, there was this, the surge that they talk about in Awakening.
Yeah.
And we really pushed, don't just, that's a flicker and you have to let that flame grow. Don't let it, get extinguished so quickly. We pushed commitment. We pushed people to come. We started membership within a few months of after that first living room minyan Shabbos, we had a membership 3 months later. People thought we were crazy. You don't even have a building. You don't even have a space. You're renting spaces. Like, what are you doing? You're charging people. And our board we had a board elected by then, and they decided, no, people have to commit. They have to invest into building a community, and this is how we're going to do it. And we're going to be an Upper East Side congregation.
You know what's so fascinating to me about what you guys built is you take a shul, and a shul is there's probably hundreds of shuls in Manhattan, and we would think, just start another shul. I want parallel that to a service or a product. Yeah. Whether someone's doing just something basic, shoes or whatever else, the power of just taking a commodity, right? You could say a shul is a commodity, maybe.
It is. We do look
and
at it.
how do you do it different and then just draw such a huge crowd? And I love what you're saying is that, you could have just said it's another shul, it's a commodity, but you said if we could look at something like this and do it differently, and look how quickly you were able to draw people to you. You could take that across anything else that you build. Community building, nonprofit, for-profit, service, product. It's understanding what the gap is that everybody else is offering, and then figure out what you can do to fill it. But also, I want to point something else out, is sometimes people do a really good job in their organizations or in their businesses of drawing people, even in something where there's a lot of competition, but they don't realize what it is about themselves that are drawing them in. And so therefore, they're not very good at continuing to build that beyond. Right. They don't understand it. And what I love about what you said is that you and your husband were super intentional. You understood what was missing. You had this opportunity to build something that filled that gap, and then you doubled down on it and continued to build it because there was a very clear understanding of what that was. And to me, that's just a powerful lesson to understand in anything you're going to do when you start something.
Yeah, definitely. It's about finding the gap, identifying it, and seeing what only you can do to fill it.
Yes.
Right? I think that's a big mistake that in general organizations and businesses also make, is that they think that, just because someone is doing something successfully, we're going to repeat that. That's actually a mistake often, because if they're doing something well in your neighborhood or in your field, right, let them do that.
Yeah.
Right? I don't need to repeat that. Let them do that. If they do some amazing program, amazing, good. Let them do it.
Do something different.
And first of all, I want to say, this is like, I really, really believe we felt the hand of God in this. And sounds evangelical, but it's really,
Absolutely.
I felt the siyata
Always, yeah.
dishmaya in this. None of this was normal.
Yeah.
Right? The way this whole story happened. And then this crazy growth. We had our members meeting last night. It's an annual meeting that we have with the members of the synagogue where we go through an update on the numbers, our expenses, income, growth, real estate, etc. And we have 722 member families now, thank God. That is
Huge.
1,600 people or something
Yeah.
like that. It's huge, thank God. So number one, it's really, really the hand of Hashem. Number two, the thing is, I find an example of differentiation. We understood very quickly, especially unfortunately after October 7th, there was this really big focus on like bringing like politics and the current situation, the matzav into shul. And we are being pressured. I mean, to this day, we're pressured by a lot of organizations and speakers and, people doing great work. Don't get me wrong. Great work somehow related to the situation either in Israel, anti-Semitism here, whatever it is. They're all banging on our doors to speak, to present somewhere in shul. And we understood very early on, even in terms of the sermon content or the classes content, people are coming to shul for the exact opposite of that. They're coming to shul for a sanctuary, for an oasis from that. Shabbos morning, they want to grow. They want to be inspired. They want to connect. They don't need to hear about the latest meeting between the prime minister and the president or the latest, and there's been so much trauma, unfortunately. Here it's been secondhand, but still, I really believe there's been so much trauma from these last few years that people are not looking for that in their shul. They wanted something different. People want to grow, to connect, to feel Jewish joy also. Jewish joy is so fleeting when it's hard, right? We need to create spaces for that. So that was like just one example of one thing we noticed. This seems to be the common trend everywhere, but we don't want to do that. We want to do something totally different.
So one of the things that I love you had said, I think on your the Meaningful People podcast you did a couple of years ago, which was really interesting to me, is you said, I believe that there should continue to be two sides of the mechitza. Or you should say, I'm going to say it again. I believe there should be two sides of the mechitza, but there should also be leadership on both sides of the mechitza. And I actually really loved that line. And I started talking about it with my husband, and I was talking about it with my kids last night at dinner. And to me, that's a very, very powerful statement that I really want to get into and talking about women's role and that it is really true that in a traditional Orthodox shul, the rabbi is on the men's side. He's really ultimately your husband's rabbi, not yours as a woman. Yeah. And that women lack the opportunity to grow in that same way, to have that connection in that same way, to have somebody that they can go to ask their shilas, their questions, and they're missing that. Yeah. And men have that. And yes, it's been like that for many, many years, but the world has changed. And women are out there now in big careers, and it's acceptable now, building businesses, having big careers. In fact, and now it's even encouraged because the men want to sit and learn, so the women are out there. And I think that's amazing that women are more ambitious, although we should talk about the difference between make a living and make enough money to be able to support your family so your husband can learn, but make sure you tame the ambitions to a certain so that you keep your role. So we're going to talk about that. But on the shul side of it, I love that you said that because that resonates very much for me, is that we don't necessarily have very many women thought leaders, very many. And when women stand up to be that, they're often ridiculed as that is not following the Masorah, the tradition, that women shouldn't be like that. What are we doing? Like, it's associated with sort of the woke feminist left that all of a sudden now you're advocating that women should have a minyan at the kotel. It goes from here all the way to here. Right. But that's totally the association. And how could we do that? But then but it's missing, wait a minute, let's sit back and say, what happens if we don't have leadership for our women on their side of the mechitza? What's going on? What's happening? I mean, I even look at a lot of women my own age, and a lot of them, the last time they've gone to a shir, the last time they've learned anything, I've listened to a podcast, a shir online, even going to a shir, and they're not. It's actually in Chicago. I know Rabbi Robinson from McCore, he's very much a big part of we need to get more education and more Torah classes, more opportunities for women to learn. And then I look at my daughter and my daughter-in-law, and they're very much, they're closer to that seminary time.
Right.
And I know especially for my daughter-in-law, she really, anytime there's a shir, she makes it very much an effort to go out. My daughter is always listening to shirim online. And so they come from seminary. They're very much learned and really inspired, and then get married and then have children. And then now, for all of us in our 40s and some in their 50s, it's it's gone. Whereas our husbands have their Rav, they have their structure, they're at shul 3 times, they're learning. So I'd love to hear your perspective. And also, I know you feel very strongly, the word feminism gets thrown around quite a bit. And it's, again, associated, even for me, I would say it's very much associated with that very woke left of as everything is equal and the same. And I've always been such a big believer that for women, it's equal but different, and very much celebrating the differences between men and women and the beautiful role I feel that Torah gives to women. And I even appreciate very much for myself the traditional role in my home. But I also have very big ideas and very ambitious. And I've actually found even in myself that in business is the place where I can have a loud voice and be a thought leader. And it's okay for most. I'm sure there's some that may think differently. But to touch any of the other areas is wait, that's not a place where that's a woman's place to be a leader. So where you've done that, you you are there, you are a leader in a place where most women aren't. So I'd love your thoughts and perspective on this topic.
The rebbetzin dilemma. So first of all, a lot of women, to their defense, women who marry rabbis they didn't really sign up for that, right? They had their own career. Maybe they don't, but this is, they were not looking for that. They happen to. Maybe they are passionate about community, but they're not really signing up to be a leader in the way we say. So I think it's complicated to expect that of all rebbetzins to stand up. I'm different, and I really feel that I was sort of for years, I was writing about women's issues and in the frum community, and literally years, maybe a decade of writing on this. And then Hashem was like, okay, Avital, enough. Stop writing and go do it. Just go do what you're talking about. You talk about female leadership in the frum community. Here you go. Here's a platform. Do it. And that was really how I looked at it. It's a fraught subject, I think, for a lot of women, because a lot of times the roles are not really formalized. But I cannot emphasize enough that if we don't have, on both sides of the mechitza, leaders, we're going to lose women. I find a lot of women in quite frum communities who, as you said, they're going through the motions, right? But they're checked out. They're not really connected. One thing I'm really proud of, actually probably most proud of the shul, thank God. And I share this only to hopefully so someone could take this and use it in their life too and in their community, that when I come to shul at 10:15, okay, there's not one seat left on the women's side. It is full, and there's women standing to daven and to learn and to listen. That is incredible to me, because our female attendance, I mean, we're at a point where we have to figure out, I think we're going to have to move the mechitza a bit, take some of the men's space. That's a big discussion, because there's so much demand. And these women feel, and that's the feedback I get again and again and again, that this is a shul where women matter, where they are heard. They serve on the board. They speak. We do have women speaking in shul. Everything is according to Halacha. Our mechitza is according to Moshe Weinstein. We are very careful with these things. And at the same time, we're figuring out how to create a space where women are meaningful participants and not merely spectators within an Orthodox setting. So to me, that is the most important thing of all. And by the way, people all the time, I have big rabbanim asking me, what's the secret to your success? Me and my husband, we're called into a lot of big rabbanim ask us. They want to meet with us, get just to hear from us, like what we've done that could be replicated elsewhere. And we're always so happy to take those conversations. And one of the things that both of us always talk about is that when you engage the women, you engage the whole family. When you engage the women, let me tell you, when you engage the young single women, guess who's going to start coming to shul? The single guys who are hoping to meet someone at Kiddush, right? That's the meaning of a vibrant community. By the way, that was the norm in pre-war Europe, right? We think of things, shul, so differently now. But that was the norm. This was the place, this was the well, right? This is where you would go to meet someone in your local shtetl, right? So we really believe that that this is the key to a successful community is 100% participation, not 50%. I think most shuls really only cater to 50%.
Absolutely, most shuls. Like, I'll tell you, my association of shuls, for sure. My husband goes to shul. When do I go to shul? If there's a simcha, if there's something else. But I don't know, at least personally, like for my own Chicago community, any shul that has a vibrant women's section at all. No Orthodox shul.
Yeah.
It's very much an afterthought.
And what's interesting to me, by the way, is that I have people like every week. It's Manhattan, so people are always passing through.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. I get to meet all these tourists or visitors. People bring their parents. People bring their kids. Depending what generation it is, and people come through, and they're coming from like other communities. Let's say standard from yeshivish adjacent communities, let's say, for the most part. We do have a nice amount of Hasidim who are also coming, people coming from Borough Park, from Muncie, just to check it out. They're curious. And that's one of the first things people tell me also, that their feedback, the women specifically, like, wow, this is like a shul where women come and where it's exciting and where we're learning and where we're talking about growth. A lot of the other thing is the content in the shul is always also, we really tailor it as much as we can possibly to be accessible to everyone. So someone who's never learned before, has no yeshiva background, can sit and hear the drasha just as much as someone who went to the mirror, and they're both going to learn something, right? So it's always high level, always rigorous, always text-based, but also always with translation and with context, right? It's very important to define things. And that is really, I think, the part of building a shul that's inclusive is saying it's okay that I'm going to give a Dvar Torah, I'm going to give a speech, or I'm going to translate every word I say in Hebrew and not assume that you are fluent in it. And also it's going to be so high level, and I'm going to quote a Gemara that you never heard of, a piece of Talmud, right? That there's an ability to do both, and that is also an unusual thing. But coming back to the women's point, I think that is really a big part of our story as well. And my husband says this too.
Can you talk a little bit about your perspective from the liberal woke, like the association? Because here's another kind of conversation that very much comes up is Masorah versus Halacha. So in fact, just in my house last Shabbos, something came up. We're asking, can women write a Sefer Torah? Oh, Megillah. We're saying, could women read Megillah for other women? Can they write a Sefer Torah? We're talking about all these things. And then we were saying,
Vatichtov Esther. It says in the pasuk, Esther wrote. She's the first woman writing.
Okay, so then that might answer some of that. But then we got into basically this conversation of very quickly people assume it's usser. Now, and I said, what do you mean? And I said, look, it's clearly not our Masorah, right? We're just talking about where it's tefillin. We're talking about all these different things. And that is really powerful. Masorah sometimes is even overrides. So, but let's just have like the honest conversation, and let's not go right to a woman's role in some of these things being usser, but like let's distinguish between what's not our Masorah, which is still very important, and what is actually halachically usser. I said, like, I'm actually really curious, and it was this whole conversation at our table that we should understand at least. Not just assume, that's usser, that's not done. Okay, because again, there's absolutely needs to be respect to Masorah, and what's going on quite a bit, I think, is with the women of the wall and some of these other things that are happening in some of the more very modern Orthodox communities where people feel like the Masorah is being challenged, and we need to protect the Masorah, and I very much believe that. But where is the balance between the evolution of how the world is changing, the evolution of the role of which women are having in the world, respecting the Masorah that we have, and also understanding what is halachically, what's asur and what is really actually halachically okay, but it's not something that we follow, and how does that world evolve?
Okay, so a lot in that question. This is not politically correct, but I think it's important to note I'm actually much less concerned about from women going into that more woke, liberal direction, largely because it's just not socially, it's pasnished, as they say in Yiddish. It's not, it's not socially accepted, right? In the communities that we grow up in and that we are raising our children in, right? It doesn't entice, I think, most women. I'm much more concerned about from women checking out emotionally and spiritually and just having this sort of by rote connection to Judaism. Yes, they keep halacha, but, they do the things, but they're not growing, they're not learning, they're not feeling connected or inspired. Yes, you went to seminary and you still feel that, the high a little bit for maybe whatever few years afterwards. But once you're living in the suburbs with 3 kids underage, whatever, you're not as connected as you once were. You're just getting through your day. You're just surviving. Your husband, his Judaism, his spirituality is very much protected, as you said, by this system. Where's yours? Right? And that is actually much more concerning to me. And I think a lot of women, sadly, I think materialism, that's really where materialism comes in the frum community, is becomes this one outlet for women who don't have that type of spiritual life and who also are not given the space to cultivate inner worlds. That's kind of what this comes down to, right? And I feel like we all think back to our 18-year-old selves, right? Whether you went to seminary and you're running around Yerushalayim, or even here, right? When you went to Shiurim and you were so excited and on fire about your Judaism, and you wonder sometimes, was that me? Am I the same person? Right? My life has become so mundane or so regular, right? So it's lacking that luster. And I think a lot of women somewhere deep down really yearn for that. They yearn to return to that side of themselves. Ashivenu, ki mechedem. We're yearning for that. And that I wish women had more access to. And that's I try to do that in my shul. I can't say I succeed, but we try. My husband and I both try to create spaces where women can connect back to that. And I think that's a bigger question for communities. It's not just for rabbanim and for rebbetzins. It's for community lay leaders as well, and thinking what programming they're going to center. And I think a lot of the programming we do, even shuls that do some programming for women, what is that programming saying, right? What is it saying are our values and where your effort should be put into, right? Is it a real shira that's going to inspire you, hopefully, fill your cup, make you excited to be Jewish, to keep the mitzvos, to learn more Torah? Or is it going to be another event that's really kind of what I think cultivating more of that side of materialism that I think has become very common?
So just kind of, again, going back, though, to the idea of the Halacha Masorah, what is it that you're hearing from Rabbanim? Because I do think people that may not really understand will automatically say, they're not following the Masorah, they're feminists, they're changing the role of women. What are you, and that's part of your controversy, right? Is that you stand up, she's controversial because she's changing or advocating to change the role of women. But really Rabbanim, I think, as you're saying, are looking at a much bigger picture too and saying, if we're going to keep our women, which is so important, which means keeping the family connected, we need to change what we've been doing. It's a different generation.
It's a different generation.
And if we don't change, we're going to lose. And you're saying basically, I'm much more concerned, and maybe Rabbanim are much more concerned about completely losing women from their connection to Yiddishkeit than worrying that they're suddenly going to become so super woke that they change the Masorah and want something so much more than that. But it is a risky path that a lot of people could argue. It could be risky.
Yes, but
You're
you
not
never
saying
take a
that.
risk.
Yeah.
You're never going to do anything in your life, right?
Right.
You have to be able to take risks. That's part of being leaders, right? Is to make bold steps sometimes. First of all, I don't think we're that bold, frankly. First of all, we check with Masorah. Like, we speak to people. We're very careful on various things. Like, we're machmir on some things people don't even know about. Details of daily community life, but we're very careful on a lot of questions. I think a lot of, first of all, there's two pieces here. There's a question of keeping Jewish women connected to the Torah they already have a connection with, and then there's a second question, which is there's so many Jewish women out there, you have no idea, who are searching and yearning and have nothing. They have no fluency, they have no knowledge, they're deprived of this, right? And I see both of those types of women, which is also very unusual in my role because I'm in Manhattan. So I have both of those women coming, right? I have to serve both of them, and they have different needs. But in the end, it's really the same need. Yeah. It's kiruv krovim and kiruv rechokim. You're bringing people closer, those who are far away and those who are already close. You still have to bring them closer too, right? Yeah. So one of the interesting things that has emerged from a lot of these conversations with rabbanim, whatever that means, but like really like serious prominent rabbinic leaders over the last few years has been and minds, and we've hosted them thankfully in the shul as well. We've invited them to come see the shul, to see what we're doing, and there's been a lot of response of like, wow, like this is like, you're specifically on the women's issue, right? That the question, like, you're engaging women, it's 100% kosher, but like this is big, like we need to figure out how to do this on scale. And it's one of the things I emphasize all the time, because I think, again, if you want to talk about like bringing people closer, in Manhattan, one of the biggest questions, I just want young Jewish people to marry other Jewish people, right? That is not going to happen if I stick to an older model of what Orthodoxy looks like for some people. And again, it comes back to what you were saying before. If you're a CEO, if you're head of a department at a hotel, sorry, saying that sentence again. If you're a female CEO, if you're head of a department at a hospital, right, a top doctor, you're top at a financial firm, and then you come into shul and you're relegated to a balcony where you're not relevant, you're just a spectator. You're sitting at the board table a few hours ago, and now Friday night you're in shul and you're not relevant.
And not even shul, also in your own organizations and in your schools, in your girl schools, right, where you have men
100%.
who are sitting at the table and the women are on the PTA. I mean, I think this is a very major issue.
It's a very major issue, and it's sad to me that it's come to this point. We are so afraid of female voices, and I think a lot of it, frankly, comes from the media that we consume that is so bifurcated, right? If you think about what the typical frum person is consuming, if you have social media, if you are online, you are consuming, it's probably going to be very materialistic, and then your alternative is to the print media that we receive, where women are faceless. There are no women. We're just cartoon characters.
Yeah.
How can you put a cartoon character on your board? That's hilarious.
Yeah.
We're not serious. We're not taken seriously, other than being mothers, right?
I mean, even in the women's magazines, so it was interesting. I saw an ad in one of the Jewish magazines for Purim costumes, and all of the little girls' faces were blurred out, but the boys' faces weren't. So I said, okay, I understand, but then blur both of them out. Like, blur the boys' faces and the girls' faces out.
Or just choose a different graphic.
Right. But it was so, I was thinking about if I was a young girl and I'm looking at this and I'm seeing that my face, a girl's face, is blurred out, the message that you're sending, even if you don't realize it, the message you're sending to those young girls is that you don't matter. And I know that's not the intent. The intent is a SNEAS issue, and I'm not educated enough on it to understand it, and I'm respectful. I really, truly believe in being respectful of everybody and not judging in anybody's. But we have to understand the messages that we're sending when we're doing that, and the effect it has so much more and so much beyond what maybe the intention was.
So I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I stopped those magazines. I don't allow them to come into my home anymore because of that, for that reason. Yeah. And by the way, I don't think it's true that this is like some communities. This is our community.
Yeah.
This media, these materials reflect the communities you and I both associate with, right?
So I love what you're saying, because you're saying either you're on social media, you're in the
and there's garbage on
right,
there.
and then that's where the materialism comes in.
Yes.
And then, or we have our magazines where there is a lot of materialism too, which
Sure.
everyone has their complaints about. Women are not shown as strong. There's women's voices are not, are not elevated.
No.
There, advertisements where women
The
are
politics
blurred out.
is only in the men's magazine, if you
Right.
know, right? There's no discussion of world issues in a women's magazine.
Right.
And again, I understand, it's same is true
Yep.
in women's magazines, I think.
But you're right in terms of where are the role models, which is such a part of what we
Right.
want to do on this podcast.
Correct.
Is showcase Jewish women leaders, because we don't have that. It's missing, and therefore, it's that message is who can you be in this world? Who can you be in this world as part of your community and as part of your career? Yeah. And I love that you're bringing this to the surface, and we do have to address this.
A lot of it is modeling. It's so funny. I had a young woman over for a Shabbos meal. On top of everything, I also sometimes used to host a lot in my home. Now the community has grown so much. It's been harder for me, but I hosted a lot. Like when I tell you I roll up the sleeves and do the hard work, I really do. I'm scrubbing the floor for Shabbos. And I remember it was about a year or two ago, I hosted a young couple, and the young woman texted me afterwards. They both work in finance, and she texted me afterwards, and they're growing religiously on their journey, like very seriously. We have a lot of people like that in the shul, by the way, a lot of people who are like on a very serious trajectory. I've seen people, I'm very proud to say, a few years ago, we're not keeping Shabbos, are keeping Shabbos. We're not keeping, like really growing in whatever way, made sense for them. And this young couple specifically, this young woman texts me after Shabbos, and she says, I just want to thank you for hosting. And I had told her over the dinner that some of the food had been catered. And that I didn't cook it myself because I didn't have time, because I work on Fridays. And she said, thank you so much for modeling that you're a working woman, you're still hosting a Shabbos meal, and you're a rebbetzin, and she's like, it means so much to me that you're a working woman with your own ambitions, your own ideas, and your own careers, and you're in this position. So she thanked me for that. It was so interesting. And I saved that little message because it meant so much to me.
Well, I love that, and I want to thank you also for being here. This is such a big part. It's part of why I've given so much time to the JWE, because I feel that it is what we are trying to be as an organization, and what we are trying to do on this podcast is to fill that void, to be able to showcase women that are strong, that are ambitious, and that are also Jewish and connected, and that you can have both. And I do agree that we need role models, and we need for girls to be able to look up to women who have been successful in all those areas, and also willing to step up and change and make changes, and not be afraid to be different, not be afraid to not go with the tide, and I love everything that you had to say today, both to younger girls that are listening, to women that are listening. So thank you so much for being so bold, for not being afraid, for when all of the haters came after you, you just doubled down and stayed strong. And that's also like a message for all of us and an incredible example. So I have just a couple questions for you as we go into our Fast Five. Okay. What is the most controversial thing that you've ever did?
Start a shul. No question.
What was there ever a time that you were going to quit, but you didn't?
Quit what?
Quit anything.
Anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a quitter. No. I've always been a writer. I've always been committed to community. I don't quit.
What would you say is your superpower?
Staying calm and collected under fire.
What is the most important message that you would deliver to young women?
Be interesting. Be different. Don't be afraid.
And what would be your final message to the entire audience?
Invest in your own inner world, in thinking, in learning, in reading more. Get off your phone. Expand your mind. Expand your soul.
This episode was made possible by our friends at Roth & Co. We are grateful for their continued partnership. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and that you'll join us for the next one. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch this conversation on YouTube, so be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until we meet again, stay inspired to lead.